What is up, guys? I'm Andres.
This is RB3.
I'm Sabrina.
And this is The Meaning of Podcast, the podcast where we talk about your favorite film directors and the deeper meaning within their films. But once again, we are doing a very special episode. I am incredibly excited because we are finally doing our top 10 films of the decade-defining movies. We all made our individual lists. Yep. And I'm very excited because I read a ton of articles, a lot of film Twitter talking about the 10 best films of the decade, the movies that define the decade, whatever it is that people want to talk about. But now that we're coming at the end of the decade, 2019, going into 2020, we can finally talk about the decade as a whole for film and what it meant for film. Because I think there's a ton of good movies that came out this decade. And I'm incredibly excited to hear what you guys think and what your guys' favorites were. So I wanted to do this as soon as possible. And I know you pushed back on me because you're like, bro, this is too soon. But I'm like, bro, we got to do it now, bro.
I have a different philosophy when it comes to lists. I don't take lists very lightly. I don't take best of the year. If you ask me, you shouldn't do a best of the year list until March or April of the next year. You shouldn't do a best of the to me, I've subscribed to the Francis Ford Coppola thing. I think he said one time, you can't really know if a movie's great until 5 years down the line. So for me, if I'm being selfish and honest, I'd say a best of the decade list shouldn't even come until 2023. But I get it. I get that.
But that's not how this world works.
But I get that's not how clicks work. Unfortunately,
yeah, I know. I was gonna say.
So we got to do this for clicks. But I also like as film school. I've studied cinema media studies all my life. It's interesting to go back and look at people's top 10 list at like the 1920s or 1930s, like especially when it's just like leaving the decade and when they do like a retrospective like years later, because a lot of the times when when you're coming straight like out of a decade and you're making those lists, you're kind of having tunnel vision for what's cool and modern at the time.
Yeah.
But then once history passes, you have a good like understanding of what actually withstood the test of time and like actually is still making impact cinematically. So I'm all for the waiting side, but I'm also for the if I gotta make another list in 5 years, I'll make another list in 5 years, and it'll totally be it'll be another way of looking at how my taste changed from now to then. So I'm happy either way.
Yeah. The first thing I want to ask you guys is, what do you think defined this decade as a whole in film? It doesn't have to be necessarily what genre did, because I think we know what genre did, but what is the overlying theme of the decade in film? And I'll start with you, RB3. What do you think that is?
Well, I've talked about this concept a lot on this podcast, the idea of metamodernism as when in film school they have the whole, classical era, then modernism, postmodernism, and it's weird that in film school they teach you postmodernism comes from 1977 all the way till now. To me, that never really made sense because every other time period is like 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and we have 40 years. So I think what started late 90s to like particularly peaked during this era is like the whole idea of metamodernism, the idea of like movies starting to reference other movies, the whole idea of like people starting to, I always talk about Lego movies like a primetime example of that. Of course, Logan, I talk about on the dramatic side of being metamodernism. They literally show you a comic book in the movie and tell you that it's a comic book movie. So I think that's what defines a lot of this decade. And to me, that's the most interesting part of it. And I also think the divergence away from the idea of the auteur and the idea of particularly the white male auteur and more of the idea of the more diversity in general. Just we do have people. We have more people like Barry Jenkins now. We have people like Spike Lee. Obviously, is still making great films to this day. So there's a lot of people who, and not even to mention the outbreak of women directors that's been happening in this decade too. I mean, the numbers are still low. As of last year, the top 100 films, only 4% were directed by women. So it's still not like great, but we are starting to see a change and a shift in the momentum, at least compared to previous decades.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if you agree with that, Sabrina, because I do feel like there's a lot of maybe even not necessarily directors, but a lot of maybe I'm thinking of people like Ava DuVernay and Patty Jenkins, but there is a lot of female directors that have kind of come into their own. Greta Gerwig, obviously, that have kind of inspired more like even film fans from females and from different women all across the country and the world. What do you think defines this decade?
Something that I thought about for like a while was kind of like when I was initially making this list, no spoilers for anything yet, but A24. Just kind of like that art house, you know, we have like smaller scale stories, and I don't know, something, I don't want to name any names yet, but you know what I mean?
Exactly.
That's something that kind of stood out to me. Those
Sure.
kind of stories being told, the diversity that gets to be in those, because they are like lower budget, so people get trusted to make these type of stories. So that's something that, I really
It's
looked at
crazy.
for this decade.
A24 just killed it this decade for sure.
And Neon too. I want to shout out Neon.
Neon.
They made some cool ones too. I saw Assassination Nation pretty recently.
Oh,
I don't
no
know if
way.
that one was dope. That was
on
super,
Hulu, right?
super dope. Yeah,
It is
That
on
was
Hulu.
super, super dope.
I haven't seen it yet, but I've seen the trailers and all that.
Same guy who did
Interesting.
Euphoria.
Same guy
right?
did Euphoria, yeah. And
Really-
they have the same music.
Yep.
I think some of the same actors. So it's like like
Really
a Euphoria
cool.
prequel, yeah.
Interesting. Alrighty. We're gonna go around the table.
But what about you? What defined the decade for you?
I don't. If I'm being honest, I personally feel like what defined the decade was a turn towards. I don't want to say pessimism, because I feel like pessimism is a little strong, but a much more bitter pill that filmmakers wanted you to swallow. There were certain themes that people wanted to make you feel, whether it's the stress of America nowadays, whether it's the election, whether it's politics, whether it's morality, whether it's good and evil, all this kind of themes, that these filmmakers wanted to make you feel that were slightly more less feel good and a little bit more like the world is burning and there's really nothing we can do about it.
Yeah.
Maybe that's just what I took away from the decade in films, but that's kind of what my list is. And it's I kind of like those movies because I do like the idea of making you feel emotions that aren't necessarily like, yeah, that was great, I'm gonna go, sing a song, even though I do have some of those films on here, but the ones that I really cater towards are the ones that were a little bit more bitter, a little bit more offensive, and that's kind of the stuff that I really cater towards this decade in film.
All right.
So,
I agree.
do you want to start? Do you want to go 10, 9, 10, 10, 10, or do you want me to start?
Whatever makes you happy.
I kind of want to start with you, man.
Start with me?
Yeah, because
Okay.
you're the star of the podcast,
That's
bro.
not even remotely true.
Yes, man.
You're on Jedi Council, and so
What does that
that's
mean?
not even,
It means nothing. All right,
okay, so
let's start with your number 10.
You're just doing this because I told you minutes before we started I haven't ranked these.
Okay, fine. If you don't want to start-
No, it's cool. It's cool.
Okay.
I got it. I already figured it out.
Let's do it.
I'm looking at it and I already figured it out.
Let's do it. Number 10.
Number 10 is easy for me. And this is only number 10 because it came out this year, and that's Parasite. I can't do this list without leaving out Parasite. I love that movie so much. It's been really, really cool. It's been an experience just talking about it, thinking about it. This is one of the first movies in a long time I actually went back and visited the soundtrack for, and actually am reading things about. So to me, it has an ultimate impact outside of just being 2019, like a film in 2019. I think it has a more worldly and speaks more worldly to what the climate of film is right now, particularly in the emergence of foreign cinema and also the emergence of class warfare that's going on and as a subtext for a lot of cinema right now too. So I really appreciate Parasite on that level, and the only reason why it's number 10 is because it's so recent, and I wouldn't have another place to put it.
How many times have you seen this one?
I saw it twice.
Okay.
I saw it twice, yeah, and then I've spent more hours watching YouTube theories and breakdowns about it. So when a movie inspires that's when it really means something.
Absolutely. Yeah, Bong Joon-ho, man, I'm telling you, he's going to sweep this awards season, in my opinion.
I hope so. I think
think
they could
so.
give a foreign director some Oscar love. They haven't done
look
it.
at Cuarón, man. And I know Cuarón is a little bit more Hollywood than Bong Joon.
But he didn't. But Roma still didn't win Best Picture.
Yeah, but he won Best Director and Best, cinematography, writer. He won a ton of awards for Roma. I think Bong Joon can really do something special.
Yeah, I just hope the movie wins Best Picture. That's why, the directors, we see a lot of directors win Best Director for even a lot of other movies we've seen movies win Best Director and not win Best Picture. I think this one should win Best Picture. That's my opinion. But
all right, let's start with your number 10, Sabrina.
Okay, so going from Parasite, definitely hard to follow. Kind of the way when I started making my list, I kind of focused on stuff that's my personal preference mixed with I want to make sure it's a great movie as well. You know, so this is probably my most controversial. I really wanted to put it on there.
Yeah.
Out of the entire list, so bear with me for a second.
Okay.
But Trainwreck.
Oh,
from
yeah.
2015.
Yeah. Judd Apatow, Amy Schumer.
Bill Hader.
Bill Hader.
Yeah.
LeBron James.
There he goes, yeah.
So let me explain. So it's so funny.
Yeah.
It's so funny. The humor is all throughout, and it obviously there's, times where it might not like miss a beat, like age well with comedies and things like that, but I think this one really holds up. The rewatchability for me is like through the roof. Me and my roommates watch it all of the time. I remember seeing it in theaters. The humor is incredibly sharp, and like Bill Hader as a leading man, sign me up. Like I'm good with that one, and I think it's kind of a refreshing take on like a rom-com, which is I think something that we needed during this decade and something we've seen a lot of.
Right.
Kind of this like sharp, witty, funny, like independent main female character. It was really cool to see that in theaters when I was like younger, because this was about like 5 years ago. And then it focuses on like divorce, death, love. I think it like hits all these spectrums, and it does it really well. The pacing's well, so you feel everything, and it feels authentic for a rom-com.
Yeah, and it's interesting because Amy Schumer has become like I don't want to say controversial, but she's become a kind of clouded figure in Hollywood, especially in the comedy circles. What are your thoughts on her? Because she did make this kind of new brand of like you said, very female independent comedy, where she's the one kind of driving the whole idea of like the alpha kind of idea versus where it's the alpha dude being like, man, I like this girl, I like that girl, and she's kind of the alpha girl doing that opposite of that.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really interesting thing that she brought to the table because it shows the like women being like kind of like shitty. Like we're like, like we're super multifaceted. Obviously, there's so many parts of us that sometimes we don't get to see on screen. Sometimes it's like this clean look, like sweet, whatever. Like no, we're normal people. Sometimes we're shitty. Sometimes we make mistakes. So I like the fact that we get to see that and we have that leading lady. But yeah, with my thoughts on Amy Schumer, like I'm not the biggest fan, which is why I'm shocked that I love this movie as much as I do.
No, I mean. Yeah, it's filmmakers do film. They can make films that you don't necessarily have a liking towards the filmmaker. But Trainwreck is interesting too because it is a comedy, but it does feature, like you said, a lot of dramatic elements. It's a great choice because it's one of those things that comedies can be just as good and can define a decade just as much as any other drama can. So great choice. Awesome.
Thank you.
I'll jump to my number 10, which is one that I was literally just telling you before we went on that, by the way, guys, we're doing 2010 to 2019. Obviously, as you should know, we're not picking our favorites of each year because I think that's silly. We're just picking out of the decade 2010 and 2019. Now that that's out of the way, because I forgot to say that, my number 10 is Birdman.
Wow.
I had to put this one on the list, and this was one I was struggling with because my honorable mentions is like I have a lot of honorable mentions, and there's a lot of other movies that I might have felt a little bit more emotionally attached towards. But when it comes to filmmaking and when it comes to quality and when it comes to something that really does say a lot and does it in a very special way, I think Birdman is a prime example of a movie that can do all those things this decade. Obviously Lubezki with the single shot. Obviously, it's not all one shot, but the fact that he does do the whole oneer throughout the entire movie, the jazz soundtrack in the back, kind of keeping up with the oneer, and that kind of the way the jazz influences the themes of the movie, the feeling of the movie, whether it's anger, whether it's sadness, whether it's joy. I mean, the music really helps a lot. And it helps with the camera work too. And obviously this is Iñárritu. This is, Edward Norton. This is an incredible cast. Michael Keaton just giving the performance of his life. And it has a lot to say about film and film culture and film criticism. Theater, you're right. It's theater. And I'm a theater guy, and maybe that's why I cater towards it. It says it through theater. But a lot of it can be transferred over to film, whether it's like... It's saying all this stuff about theater criticism and theater performance and all this stuff about theater and art. But you can kind of transfer that over to film and how all those themes hit the same, avenues of film. And I just think this movie came together in a way that really reflected the decade because the movie's called Birdman.
Yeah.
And it's about a superhero.
I was gonna say we're talking about metatextual.
I was gonna say talking about meta.
Yeah, that's super meta. The fact that they got Michael Keaton, Batman to play. Trust me, that movie came so close to making my top 10. Okay. I really wanted it to too. Yeah. That's actually that and Moonlight are the only two Best Picture winners that I actually like this entire decade. Honestly. So yeah, that's I love that pick, man.
But yeah, to me, Birdman really has all those themes, and it hit it really well. And again, Michael Keaton. It was just hard for me to be like, I just can't leave Birdman off that list. And to be fair, I think Birdman is going to influence other filmmakers and other directors, and I think it kind of already did slightly with episode 5 of Watchmen, just with that little jazz and the little oneers. I was like, oh, cool. I feel like this little, like, add some jazz, add
good
some
connection. Yeah,
add some jazz, add some oneers, and make a little feel. I just think Birdman has a lot of just artistic style that Iñárritu brought. So shout out to Birdman. That's my number 10.
That's a great one.
Let's go with your number 9 or 3.
I'm changing in my head like as we were going.
Oh, no worries, man.
So I am gonna put actually Arrival as my number 9. Arrival is one of those kind masterpiece. I think it's one of the only movies I gave a 10 out of 10 to when it came out. At least since I've been reviewing movies. I love everything about Arrival. I love the cerebralness of it. I love the texture, the feel. It feels very raw and natural, and that's a lot to do with cinematographer Bradford Young too, and his work on that. And obviously Denis Villeneuve is a genius when it comes to directing. The whole thing. Amy Adams is very easy for her performance to feel kind of empty and shallow. But once you understand the context of what's happening at the end, and it has one of the better reveals towards the end of the movie, I think, of any movie that we've seen in recent times. So all of the elements, the music too, all of the elements in this movie just plays to making the absolute package for a great science fiction movie.
Absolutely. So. I mean, it's incredible. And you're right, the score, man, I think it's the theme of it, the On the Nature of Daylight. Of Daylight. Mm-hmm. I think it's what it's called.
From Max Richard.
Yeah. That's what. Oh my God, it's incredible. Just that score can just make me burst into tears.
It's not from that movie, by the way. It's from something else. Yeah.
Oh, but it doesn't. It plays in the movie.
It plays throughout the movie.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I was gonna say it because I remember that scene where towards the end it plays, and I was like, so good.
Yeah. That's why it couldn't get nominated for Best Original Score.
I see.
It's because the majority of it was from another thing.
Oh wow.
This is, man. I talked to you beforehand about Denny. I think Denny really proved a lot this decade, and I think Arrival is a prime example. Any thoughts on Arrival, Sabrina?
Definitely. Amy Adams' performance was something.
Yeah.
I love her in that role. Mm-hmm. Yeah, she did really great. So I think it's a good one.
You know what I love about Arrival? That I feel like, everyone talks about all this kind of stuff, and it's a very huge movie in the sense of thematic elements. I love the idea, and I just love the idea of obviously the realism of it, right?
Right.
And the fact that if there really is an alien species that comes down to Earth, obviously you're going to bring Jeremy Renner, the scientist, but at the same time, a linguist, someone who's a language expert, is just as much science as the guy who's about physics and chemistry and all this kind of stuff.
Right.
And I just love that idea of communication being the key to life. Literally, the key to life is communication with another species, with another group of people, with another country, whatever it is. That's the key to bringing everyone together. And I was like, that's bomb. I don't know. It's incredible. Let's go with your number 9, Sabrina.
Okay, mine is Moonlight.
Oh, Moonlight. Okay.
So,
nice.
I was in awe when I saw it in theaters. I just think it's incredibly unique. I mentioned A24 with the fact that they're giving so many different people voices to make these types of films that are so strong, so powerful. They're really impactful, at least obviously to me and a lot of people. They just mean a lot. Studying or looking into just life and human sexuality and all these different themes, especially in a male sense, is something that I think is really important because it kind of shows the whole masculinity aspect and everything like that. So it just feels really authentic, really warm and tender in the good moments, and then in the bad ones, it hits us in the heart. Yeah.
Thoughts on Moonlight?
That's good. I probably will speak more on it a little later.
Oh, okay.
But
No, it's okay. You're
It's
allowed
funny.
to say that.
I actually should have said my original number 9 that before I moved it around. Don't worry about it though. It's all good. Let's keep it moving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, you could say it now.
Okay. So before I said Arrival, my original number 9 was If Beale Street Could Talk. But then I said Arrival, and now that you're saying Moonlight, I kind of can't not put Moonlight on my. Whatever. We'll talk about it later on down the line.
Are you sure?
But I'm taking Beale Street off. Beale Street's going to officially be a first honorable mention I mentioned.
Yeah.
But that was going to be my number 9 for sure.
Okay. Definitely.
Yeah.
Even,
this is wild, bro.
Yeah, you're changing it. I'm switching up. See, is the
Dang,
pressure
bro,
of
you're messing up my
ranking
show.
it, man. I'm telling you.
Messing up my show. I'm just playing.
Yeah, nah.
I have a question for you guys. How did you feel about like the aspect of like putting it into the 3 like life, like
3 parts of life.
Yeah, like adolescent, young adult.
Yeah.
Like, did that impact you guys in like a certain way? I don't know, because for me, I thought that was absolutely beautiful. Like when we get those switches, and it's like 2.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Right?
Yeah, I thought it worked very well. I mean, you're allowed to talk about it, bro.
No. I agree too. I wanted to know what you really thought, because you really just liked the first part, and then you don't really like the rest of the movie after that.
That's not true. I just felt like it wasn't necessarily. It's a very powerful movie. It's a very emotional movie.
Yeah.
But I didn't feel I didn't feel the connection that I wanted to feel. If that's allowed.
Yeah.
No, yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
No, it's all subjective.
Yeah.
I get it.
I remember you were very specifically upset about Mahershala Ali exiting the film too.
Oh, okay.
Just because I felt like he was just literally like Neo in the Matrix, like dominating that film, and I was like, oh my god, he's incredible. I told you, I was like, this guy is stunning, and then I was like, oh, he's gone, cool.
Yeah,
20 minutes.
But it is
Oscar.
crazy. It is crazy, what he can do in such a short amount of time.
20 minutes and he won an Oscar.
Yeah,
like
I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah,
that's insane.
He's the GOAT right now. He's the GOAT.
He really is.
Yeah, no, I think the narrative structure is so fascinating because it was originally adapted from like a play, and obviously plays are divided into those act kind of structures. So it's kind of interesting that they utilize that in the filmic like perspective.
Yeah.
I also like the idea of using 3 different actors too. I like the idea of showing this connective person through this changing body. So yeah, I love I love a lot of it. So.
If I'm being honest, and I know this is wrong of me to compare, If Beale Street Could Talk to me is superior.
Well, see, this
is the superior film.
Well, so I was going to mention this when I mentioned Moonlight later, but I have a hard time.
I put it at my number 2 for best of the year. I think Beale Street. Or 3.
Yeah, and I put it as my number 1 last year. And that's the thing. So I personally enjoy watching Beale Street more because I like Beale Street. I like the music more in it. I like a lot of elements about Beale Street a little more than I like about Moonlight. But what I can't ignore about Moonlight is the fact that it became like the new quintessential film school movie. I mean, like literally before it was Do the Right Thing, and that's literally the only black movie they were showing in film school. Now it's both Get Out and Moonlight.
Yeah.
And Moonlight particularly, I think, is so artful in like its presentation, from like editing, cinematography, acting, and performances, all around nature of the filmmaking of the movie. Like, he can't be ignored for his greatness. So even though I like Beale Street a lot more, not a lot more. I like them close to. I like Beale Street more, but I think Moonlight deserves a place on the top of the decade list.
Okay,
for sure.
Okay, and
it can't be ignored.
You don't want to say right now, like it's on your list, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're allowed to say. Let's talk about it.
Yeah. So we only say where it's at.
Yeah, you don't have to go in order.
Okay, it's my number 4.
Yeah,
that's my number 4. We'll circle back to number 4. But
Awesome.
I love Moonlight, and I again, when me and you both walked out of it, I probably said some not so great things about it.
Yeah, we both did, to be fair.
Yeah. But I do genuinely, like, after time and after reliving this movie, like I said, I think I even told you once on one of these podcasts that I think I watched it 3 different times in film school ever since it came out.
Wow. Really?
One for an editing class, one for a race relations class, and one for some other class. So the fact that it has made that much of an impact on both the film academia world and also the fact that it won Best Picture, a movie about gay black men winning Best Picture, it's pretty revolutionary. Over the controversial Moonlight overshadowing thing too. Yeah. It's all great history. It's all great for the history.
And shout out to XXXTentacion.
Yeah, wait, what?
The song. I'm just being dumb.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good one. Jay-Z made a song called Moonlight.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. I just every time I think Moonlight, I think Moonlight.
Have you heard the new Weeknd songs that just came out?
I did.
Oh, they're fire.
They're fire. Yeah, I like Blinding Lights, bro. That
Blinding
80s.
Lights. That's the 80s shit. But when that Heartless, that Heartless song. song.
Heartless is crazy.
That's fire. That's fire. He's just talking straight Heartless.
I was gonna say, damn, bro, Selena Gomez out here, bro.
Or Bella Hadid, right?
I don't know who he's dating now.
Yeah.
My number 9. This is a very personal preference, and I know, this is all based on what people like. But I really do feel like this is a powerful movie. Speaking of, I think this is a Neon movie. I don't think it's a Neon. I don't know. I'm going with A Ghost Story. I think A Ghost Story.
A24.
Yes.
A24.
Yep.
There you go. I think A Ghost Story is one of the most emotionally profound, thoughtful movies, and it has literally maybe 2 scenes of dialogue, which is incredible. It's literally a guy in a ghost outfit, a sheet of, literally a sheet over his head. And yet it says so much just through score, just through emotion, just through eyes, just through feelings of life, death, legacy, memory, all these enormous themes. And obviously there's one central scene that kind of lays that all out where the guy's just ranting. And a lot of people don't like that scene because it says everything the movie's trying to say without saying it, and he's actually saying it. But I do feel like this movie is just so powerful and so emotionally moving. And it literally is so low budget. It won, I believe, when in the Independent Spirit Awards, when it comes to the most low budget movie. I think they had like a under $500,000 or something like that award, which is wild. And it won that. And a lot of it has to do with performance. And part of this too is because of my love for Rooney Mara. But her performance in this movie is just so powerful, and she's acting off nobody the majority of the movie. She's really just acting towards the camera. This is a single performance because obviously Casey Affleck is in this movie, but he's only in it for a short amount of time, so she's really acting to us. It's a very theater type performance.
Is Casey Affleck actually in the? Oh, nice. That's good.
But it's one of those things where I just felt like this movie is just so powerful, so emotionally moving, and it's just one of the best movies I've ever seen. And I just had to put it on my list. So.
It's in my honorable mentions. I agree with everything that you said. Like how much story you could tell just through like visuals.
I think I talked about with you in this movie.
We had a short conversation
because
about it.
This is the one weird movie that everyone's like. I'm like, I like Spider-Man, and I like A Ghost Story. It's like the one thing
that
makes me
no
weird.
One has seen.
Right.
Let's move on to your number 8.
Number 8. All right. So serving up number 8. Here comes Mad Max Fury Road. George Miller's action masterpiece is one of my favorite movies. I think it came out in 2015. It's probably my favorite movie that came out of that year too. The movie is so fun, so high energy. The fact that George Miller is as old as he is, no offense, talking about ageism or whatever, but the fact that he's up in age and still able to make a movie that impactful, that quick, that energetic, and salute to his wife who's the editor on the movie. I forget her name off the top of my head too, but yeah, one of the best from a cinematography standpoint, excellent. From an editing standpoint, excellent. That's hard to get editing points from me too. And just the story in and of itself, the idea of like Mad Max being encountered with like this group of women and like them taking him on this journey of like self-independence from like this literally dude
dictator.
Who milks, dictator who literally milks them for milk. Like that's crazy. And uses them for children. And so the fact that, and Zoe Kravitz obviously can't know Zoe Kravitz. Of course. Charlize Theron, Tom Hardy, everything about this movie is just absolutely wonderful. And even though it might not be the most amazing story, you get a lot of characters. It's one of the best examples of visual storytelling I think we've seen in a long, long time.
Absolutely.
So, Nicholas Hoult too. Gotta salute to him as well.
Absolutely. This is my number 5. Full disclosure. I'm allowed to jump around. If you say one that's on my list, I'm gonna say it's on my list.
All right, cool.
It's my number 5.
All right, tell me where it's at then, man.
It's my number 5, and everything you said is absolutely spot on. It's one of those things where what can you do with an action movie, right? And it's that idea of an action movie being regarded as lesser than, and this is a prime example of something that can be more than. And it's just literally almost one entire action scene, and yet with the score, with the music, with the filmmaking, with the visual storytelling, like you said, it becomes so powerful and so emotionally moving. And it's just one of those movies that is kind of a classic like film epic, where the word epic is not really thrown around anymore, but this is kind of an epic. I'm talking like a movie that's there to blow your mind, like Moses, Ten Commandments, Lawrence of Arabia, Mad Max Fury Road. Like I really do feel like, obviously not at the same level, but that's the kind of genre that this is really pushing towards, where it's supposed to blow your mind when you see a giant semi-truck doing like 10 flips in the air. It's like, that's the kind of mind-blowing stuff.
Practical too.
Practical. And that's the kind of mind-blowing stuff I want to see in cinema. And that's the prime example of what Mad Max is. And the fact that it's the editing, like you said, bro, is so like bonkers.
Yeah.
It won Best Editing for Best Picture.
Yeah,
I mean,
definitely
at the Oscars.
Even beat The Big Short, which is also an incredibly edited film.
But this movie, like, the editing really helps a lot. And there's a lot of moments where it's sped up.
Yeah.
I don't know if you, obviously you noticed that.
Yeah.
And it kind of makes it feel like otherworldly, like almost demonic, where the earth has now become hell. And it has a lot of themes of like this ecological warfare that we're in, of dictatorship,
environmentalism.
Of classism,
that's something we didn't even talk about.
Environmentalism.
Yeah.
Like, it has a lot to say, surprisingly, for being just like a giant semi-truck movie. And I don't know, it's a very powerful movie, and it was one of my favorites of 2015. I think I put it number 2.
No,
any
same.
thoughts?
When I initially made my list of like 30 and narrowed it down from there, that was on it. So definitely honorable mention type of thing. You know, it's a great movie. We all enjoyed it. So we're all on the same page.
Yeah.
Your number 8, Sabrina.
Okay. Black Swan.
Oh,
yeah.
I like it.
You don't know how close. I
like it.
Yeah, damn, that was so close to me.
No, it's one of my favorite psychological thrillers. I feel like Aronofsky has proved himself so many times.
Oh, yeah.
So this is just another one of those examples of how talented and innovative he is. The direction's magnificent. I love how it shows like the toll on the body and like how like passionate and, you know, like artistic ambition, which I'm going to talk about in another film later. So yeah, I think it's incredibly riveting, intoxicating, super eerie. Easily, in my opinion, Natalie Portman's best performance, besides something like Jackie. That was also great.
Right.
But from the second I see the opening scene, like I'm hooked immediately, right away. And it shows the lengths and extremes of artistic ambition and passion. I feel every single thing that she does, and we're just like rooting for her this entire time. And it's like, girl, chill.
Right.
Like, it's like, yeah, but I get it. You know, when you really love something, when you really want something, sometimes you take that toll. So that's why that movie freaks me out.
Yeah. You preaching to the choir. I mean, that movie is so stylistically bold. I mean, I think we haven't really seen a lot of psychological thrillers even take the approach that this movie is taking, because it's like, it's so grounded in realism. Like, it feels so real and so material, even to the point where you're growing feathers out of her back. Even that feels like something that could really happen in this situation, because Aronofsky shoots. I mean, we talked about Aronofsky at length. That was our first episode, The Meaning of, and we obviously both love Aronofsky and what he has to say in his movies, and his whole approach of like shooting a lot of close-ups and making things feel really tight and compactful really like emphasizes the stress of this movie. So
can I off that exact same point, I literally had to bring it up. Matthew Libatic, his DP is deserves like literally to be mentioned the same way with Aronofsky, the guy who shot the movie Black Swan. Because to me, that guy is one of the best DPs, and he DP'd like a ton of movies. Like, he DP'd Iron Man. He obviously did The Fountain with Aronofsky, which I think is one of the most beautiful movies ever.
That's a very beautiful movie.
So 100%. The way he works with his DP and shoots this movie is one of the best shot movies in a while.
And even the final performance at the end too is just sends chills down your spine.
So good.
Yeah.
Great choice, man.
I love how like dizzying the camera work is. Like when she's spinning and it's going, you're in it with her. You're locked in. You're feeling everything. So that's why.
That might also be the best female performance of the decade too.
Interesting.
Really?
That might be top one. Yeah. I mean, for me at least. I mean,
it's great. I still think it's tough, because I still think, like you said, Jackie. Have you seen Jackie?
Jackie was great.
I haven't seen Jackie.
I've
seen half of it. I've seen half of it. Yeah, I've seen half of it.
I was very pro Natalie Portman winning the Oscar that year, because my parents and I saw Jackie, and we were like, bro, I love Emma Stone, but my God, Natalie Portman ran circles around Emma Stone. That performance was bonkers.
It's just 4:3, man. I just can't watch a movie in 4:3. I just can't get it. I don't get it. I'm kidding.
So that is your number 8. My number 8, I think it goes to me, right?
Yes, it goes
back to me.
Yep.
My number 8 is a movie that a lot of people have on their list, but I really do feel like this movie is it's a very cinematic movie. It's a powerful movie.
Yeah.
And that's Inception.
Oh, nice.
I had to put this on my list. There was no way I was leaving this one off the list. First time watching this movie is an experience in itself.
Yeah.
Watching this one with my two friends who went with me, we were both like, this is the type of mind-blowing experience you want to have in a movie. And the fact that it's original, the fact that it's this weird fantasy sci-fi thriller kind of, all these genres, anime movie that I always say it is, like there's so many genres that this thing is referencing that it's just so powerful, so idealistic. It's an incredible movie, not just on a visual scale, but on a real scale, whether it comes to themes or whether it comes to real world projection, right? The idea of someone stealing corporate knowledge in someone's dreams.
Corporate espionage, but with like a fantasy like twist.
That's what it is, man. That's the coolest thing, and that's something that Ghost in the Shell, the anime series, does really well, where they talk about if someone has the ability to hack into someone's brain. Obviously, this is Ghost in the Shell, not Inception. The first thing people would do is go after corporate leaders, CEOs, billionaires. Like, that's the first thing you would hack into. You wouldn't hack into some criminal and rob a grocery store. You would hack into corporate CEOs. And that's the idea that Inception brings. It's like, if I can jump into someone's dream, I'm going for the richest guy in the world. And I'm going to steal whatever's in his head and steal, like, corporate knowledge. That idea within itself, and then expanding that into, like, an action sci-fi thriller is just absolutely incredible, mind-blowing, beautiful movie that really shows Nolan is one of the GOATs of this decade because of what he does with Inception. And obviously, he does a lot of great movies this year, and it was tough. It was tough for me to not pick some of his other movies because I was gonna, but I was like, bro, I have to give it to Inception. If I have to pick one Nolan movie this decade, I'm giving it to Inception. So
no, do you have Inception on your list or
no? I don't.
Okay, no. good. Because I'm gonna do a little shitting on it. I'm sorry. No, I'm kidding. No, I love Inception. I absolutely. If you would have asked me, I think 5 years ago, it definitely would have made the list. I still watch that movie to this day. I think I watched it as recently as last month too. And the scene that always moves me at the end, particularly, is when they're faking the hospital scene for Cillian Murphy, and then the actual music starts playing, and they hand him the little. They open the safe, and it's the little spinner thing.
The wind thing?
Yeah. That to me, like, always moves me. It, like, always touches me. And it's so weird that it's a movie that's supposed to be simulating emotion, but it actually evokes a real emotion out of somebody. I think it's just really powerful. The only reason why I wouldn't put this in my personal top 10 is just the exposition. I think I've said that when we talked about the Nolan episode. I think this movie just has a lot of exposition that's hard to get through for me personally. But otherwise, like, as a filmic presentation, cinematography, I think the guy who did the movie with Johnny Depp, whatever his name is, he did a great job with the actual scale of the movie too. So it's a bold film for sure.
Yeah, and I can justify that exposition. Obviously, we're not debating. Yeah. But it's very. I've always said this before because a lot of people have talked about anime films with me, and I've always said that's very anime. I'm sorry, but in anime, watch an anime pilot, any of them, whether it's My Hero, whether it's Dragon Ball Z, they always do like a 15-minute exposition. This is what the world is, because it's so otherworldly that you kind of have to explain it. Right. But you're right. One of my favorite line in the entire movie is when Leonardo DiCaprio says, "Positive emotion trumps negative emotion every time." And I just love that quote because it's the idea of positivity versus negativity and sadness versus joy in this weird action movie. What's going to win, happiness or sadness? And the fact that you said they choose this happy little moment, it's like this emotional scene.
Yeah, but it completely flips the entire operation.
Oh, it's just so good, man. I love it. Any thoughts on Inception?
I really love the score.
Yeah,
if I had to
Hans Zimmer goes
scores,
hard on this movie.
If I had to rank scores, that would be so good. Oh my god.
I mean, every Hans Zimmer Nolan movie score, in my opinion, is perfect.
Yeah.
So.
And also, I guess I'm spoiling in there. Honorable mention, but Dunkirk also came really close to making the list too.
That's what I was going to say.
Dunkirk was a perfectly shot and edited movie, and I would have just put it for the sake of like just how experimental it is. But just fell short. So, yeah.
Your number 7.
My number 7. So this one is the only documentary on my list, unfortunately. And I do have to apologize to the documentary community because there's been a lot of great documentaries. This has probably been the peak of documentary decades, especially with TV and Netflix and everything. My prize got to go to the 2014 film Citizen 4. This
interesting.
Yeah. The
Snowden one, right?
Yeah, the Edward Snowden movie. And I forget the director of the movie right off the top of my head.
I can look it up for you.
Yeah, please look it up. Yeah, my laptop's down. She made a documentary about Edward Snowden that didn't necessarily villainize him or iconize or make him a hero, but it did present the truth. Like, it presented the information of how much of our phones, of our laptops, of every single device is actually plugged into our day-to-day life, how much data is being conducted, how much we're being listened to, and how privacy isn't really a thing of like our generation anymore.
Yeah.
And telling that story with Edward Snowden and pardon me, do you have the director's name?
Laura Poitras.
Laura Poitras. Okay, so this movie ended up becoming so impactful to the narrative of Edward Snowden, to the idea of Edward Snowden, that literally Oliver Stone reshot his entire Snowden movie to add her as a character in this film. Wow. So she's interviewing Joseph Gordon-Levitt as if they're shooting this movie. So an actual fictional movie took from a documentary and fictionalized it because that is the most accurate. That's at least in the interpretation of Oliver Stone. I think, at least from the interpretation of the Academy too, because this movie actually won Best Documentary when it came out. This is the definitive way of telling this story. So for me, it's politically powerful. It's very telling. It's very eye opening, and it's also co-produced by HBO too. Yeah. So for an HBO feature length co-production of like this documentary thing, it really is really powerful.
100%. And we have to give a shout out to documentaries this decade. Like you said, man, there's so many. OJ Made in America is mind blowing.
Yeah.
In my opinion, Icarus is one of the best documentaries I've ever seen.
Netflix.
Salute to Netflix for making that. So absolutely. What are your thoughts?
So I've never seen that, but I'll definitely check it out. Yeah.
No, it's really great. And also, what's cool about, it's kind of boring towards the beginning. You kind of have to get into it. But like I said, as compared to somebody like Michael Moore, who makes very left-wing political movies that, I agree with, but maybe the rest of the world won't.
Yeah.
This movie does a pretty good job of staying pretty far in the middle. It just gives you kind of
very informative.
Yeah, it's more about the information than it is about actually convincing you to empathize or sympathize with this guy.
Yeah.
So,
and that's always important when watching something like that. You want to have that like objectivity a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Your 7.
My 7 is Lady Bird.
Yeah.
So tell us why.
Of course, obviously, we all know it's Greta Gerwig's directorial debut. I absolutely adore every single thing she did with the movie. I just think it's insanely refreshing for a coming-of-age story. It's extremely
It is fart.
So we're gonna cut that out. No, we're not. We're cutting that out.
Got it.
So it's a refreshing coming-of-age story. It's extremely smart. It's funny. It's almost smart, right? Smart and funny.
Yeah.
Extremely smart, funny, emotional. With Saoirse Ronan and Laurie Metcalf, they're amazing together as mother and daughter. Like, we feel that from the beginning. All of their moments land so well. One of them, obviously the opening scene, but another one that really sticks with me is when she says, like, her mom says, "I want you to be the best version of yourself you can be." And she says, like, "What if this is the best version?" I was, like, in theaters, and I was like, ugh.
Yeah.
But it's just a really beautiful, charming film, and it was one of my favorites of 2017. I just think 2017 was an amazing year, so it's kind of hard to stack them all up against each other.
Right.
But what are your guys' thoughts on Lady Bird?
This is on my honorable mentions.
Okay.
So it almost made my list because I really do feel like it is one of the best of the decade, 100%. And this is a movie RB3 and I saw together, which is kind of funny.
Crying in each other's shoulders.
Yeah, exactly. We're like, bro, that 15-year-old white girl though. I feel you, girl.
I felt it.
That's what I love about it. We can all understand it. It's not made for like girls. It's not made for everybody. Like, if you had a childhood, you were like an adolescent one time, you were a young adult, like you'll understand exactly what she's going through. So she did an amazing job of really like reaching out to people and being super authentic in that way.
100%. We both came out, and I told you looked at me and you're like, bro, I love that movie. Yeah. And I was like, bro, that's one of my favorites of the year. And it's funny because it is that idea, like you said, that I can relate to a movie about a Sacramento teenage girl.
Yeah.
Literally nothing like my background, but it's one of those things that's how powerful that movie was.
In like the early 2000s, she's going through that whole like alternative thing.
It was funny. Yeah. It was great. Yeah. Your thoughts on Lady Bird?
No, I love Lady Bird too. Unfortunately, it's not on my list either, but I really do genuinely enjoy that film a whole lot. I think it's probably the best. I know that there's a whole few years where it was like Lady Bird and Edge of 17, and I think even this year Booksmart kind of invokes that role. Exactly. But to me, this is like the peak of like of those like coming of age stories that we've seen this decade. So
100%. If I had to pick, I would say Lady Bird is by far better than any of those movies.
Or Easy A. Or Easy A. Easy A too. I love Easy A.
Oh yeah.
Am I the one who likes Easy A?
No, I love Easy A.
Yeah. You don't like Easy A?
Yeah, it's fine.
Come on, man. 17 again. Salute to 17 again. That's another one of my personal.
17 again.
Yeah.
All right, I go hard for that one.
Yeah.
That one's dope.
I own that movie, man.
I love that movie.
Yeah.
My number 7. This is the one that I was referencing before. This is the most heart I put, and I know a lot of people are like, whatever, it's not that great, but I really do feel like it is that great, and it is that powerful, and it is that
Battle
emotional.
Angel?
No. It's number 1.
Yeah.
That's my number 1, bro. This is Creed. Creed is my number 7.
Right.
I really do feel like this is one of the best films of the decade. Ryan Coogler took the Rocky franchise and updated it in such an emotionally powerful, relevant, unique way that I thought was so genius and so just taking a movie like Rocky. Like we've talked about Rocky, this, what did it came, 77, 76 come out?
76.
76. And taking it into like, the modern era.
Yeah.
And it did it so well, so emotionally moving and powerful and unique. The score is mind-blowing, and the themes of the movie, of fatherhood, of growing up in this culture, in this world that is different than your own, and relating to someone like an old man Rocky, going up against your heroes. Like all these themes are in this movie, and I really do feel like it is one of the best of the decade. And I know a lot of people overlook it because it's just a fun sports movie, and I'm like, no, it's a powerful, emotionally, incredibly well shot, incredibly well directed story that just because it's feel good doesn't necessarily mean that it's it's a throwaway feel good movie to make money. And I'm like, no, this is one of those rare movies that, in my opinion, can be a sports feel good, make money, all those kind of things that people want from a Rocky movie, but at the same time be an art house, emotionally award-winning movie, that it can be that same thing. So I give it to Creed. It's one of my favorites of the decade, and that's why I put it at number 7.
No, I agree. I think it definitely should be in the conversation. Like, I agree with your opinion. It's not mine, but it definitely should be in the conversation. It has a lot of heart. Ryan Coogler, he did incredible with that one.
Yeah.
And, taking on this story from before, everything you said, I agree with.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think the portrayal of boxing in this movie alone it deserves a spot of recognition because, before this movie, there's really just two real ways of shooting boxing sequences. The Rocky way, where the camera's like super far outside of the arena and it's kind of zoomed in and looks it's supposed to look like an actual boxing match. Or there's the Raging Bull way, that's the Martin Scorsese super subjective, like you're inside of the ring and literally taking a character perspective. And then there's this movie that literally puts you inside of the ring but moves around the scene. And that's the first time we've seen a boxing movie take that. I mean, we've seen Cinderella Man, obviously Ron Howard, have some of those elements, but this is the first time we've seen the long take boxing sequence for one. That last match at the end, too, just great editing all around. And the music was great. Louis Gorson is one of the best soundtracks, I think, for this movie.
100%.
We always talk about that scene where he's running with the motorcycle.
I love every time it gets me. Every time I watch that scene, if I want to feel something, that's that scene, bro.
Yeah, where he's outside Rocky's Throwing it
Oh
up.
my god!
Yeah, nah,
and
so
the score rises.
Yeah. Best alone has been in a long time too. Best alone has been in a long time.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, and the fact that he rescued Meek Mill, bro. He brought him back from the
I don't know about all that.
This was when Meek Mill was getting shot at by Drake in 2015.
Hey,
but I love Creed.
Yeah, I love Creed
your number 6, man.
My number 6. Okay, so this is the part of the list that I probably am going to start showing more of the toxic side of my film taste.
Okay, that's fine.
So just right off the bat, let's just jump into it. The Wolf of Wall Street.
Okay,
is my number 6.
Yeah.
This movie is extreme, is excessive, is overbearing, is unsensible how exclusive this movie is, but I love every second of it. This is a 3-hour of just, you know, a lot of times when you talk about movies about Wall Street, think about like the original Wall Street, right? The Oliver Stone one where it's like greed is good. And the whole idea of greed is like, what's the morality standpoint of it? This movie has no morality, and I think it's pretty much intentional, like to this extent. Like it shows you how far this one dude, Jordan Belfort, who, by the way, his real life story is even more extreme than this movie in and of itself. But the fact that it could take this story of access and luxury and kind of present like an artful cynicism to it. To me, I always think there's one scene in particular I always think about where Jordan throws off his like $400,000 watch and he throws into the crowd. It's a slow motion shot of all of these hands just reaching for that one gold watch. And then once it's finally caught, everybody just starts scrapping over it. And it's just amazing how in those three shot connections of him throwing the watch to slow motion of the hands grabbing it to people fighting over in the next shot, how you could get an elevated scale of the persuasion that money has on people and the persuasion and greed that can overcome somebody. So overall, I think this movie is great.
Yeah.
It's my favorite Scorsese movie of the decade too.
Oh,
so.
interesting.
Even a lot of people putting The Irishman up there, but I like Wolf of Wall Street.
Scorsese, he really is a master of filmmaking. There's no denying that, and you could see it in every single one of his films. But I like how he shows you different aspects of what he can do in every single one of his films. And
right.
Wolf of Wall Street is a prime example.
Yeah, and I wanted to put Silence up there too, but Silence is a very different film, but I think they both evoke the same kind of spirituality to some extent too. So.
Yeah, and that's something that obviously I think Scorsese does in every single one of his movies.
Yeah.
Some sort of spirituality or some sort of commentary on bigger themes of life.
Exactly.
Sabrina, any thoughts? Or?
Yeah, no, that's on my honorable mentions.
Really?
So I
That's
agree
crazy.
with you about that. Yeah, I love that one. I just feel like everybody can enjoy it and have a good time. So you do not feel that runtime at all. That's something I noticed. I had no idea that it was like 3 hours long.
Yeah. By the way, the editing in this movie, it's probably my favorite edited movie on this list, even maybe more so than Mad Max.
Really?
Because there's a lot of scenes where it's really, really bad. Like there's the scene in particular where Jordan Belfort, Leonardo DiCaprio, and Jonah Hill meet for the first time. There are a lot of shots where they're talking, but their mouths don't even move. You know, there's a lot of really bad incontinuity. But to me, that's part of the charm of it, right? Like the whole idea of like these being like super spaced out, drugged out guys. Like nothing's really supposed to make sense anyway. And the pace, like you said, the pace is so fast until the very end when it's not fast, and you very much feel it then too. You feel like uncomfortable and you want to just like leave at those moments, but it's so great. To me, it's amazing. Yeah.
Great choice, man. Your number 6, Sabrina.
Okay, mine is Short Term 12.
Okay.
I was close to putting this on.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my God. No, I'm so glad to hear that because I feel like it's so underseen. Not too many people have seen it. But yeah, it's just really impacting. Like I can't watch that and like feel like okay afterwards. Just the ensemble cast. Like for a budget that was that low, I think like it was like $500,000 or less or something like that. Rami Malek, Brie Larson, Caitlin Dever, Lakeith Stanfield.
Yeah,
like,
boy.
Lakeith.
Yeah. It's incredibly intimate. You're like into these people's like world, and it almost feels like you're like listening in on something that you shouldn't be. Like I feel like as I'm watching it, I'm like, ouch, like I should not be like seeing all of this happening. But yeah, you feel the full range of emotions when you're watching it. You understand their characters. You understand why they are the way they are. You just kind of see like the hard the hard parts of life, which is always important to have like in stories like this. I believe this is like a must-see film. It's on Netflix, so if you haven't seen it, check it out. But yeah, it's just incredibly heartfelt, and I love it.
Absolutely. No, I totally agree. Well, it's my number 3.
Oh,
so, yeah. I guess I'll just hop in on this talk too. Yeah.
It's in my honorables. It's your number 3, and it's in your number 6.
Movie,
yeah. No,
Talk to me a little more about it.
I honestly really dig this movie on a lot of levels. I think it's a very subtle movie in the way that's presented, but I think it presents a lot of emotion just through its subtlety. I think, for one, when you talk about the cast ensemble, like the fact that this movie did break
Brie Larson, Rami Malek.
Rami Malek was in another honorable mention of mine, The Sweet Blood of Jesus from Spike Lee.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, he was in that before too, but Short Term 12 brought a lot of people to a much higher level, and you could feel that. Like, you could feel even the scene when Brie Larson is trying to confess her like pregnancy, and like the way the camera just lingers for just long enough for you to like really empathize with like her side of it, versus if you were cutting back and forth between her and the dude in the bathroom a certain type of way, it would have felt like very mixed and muddled. But the fact that you fully resonate with her the entire time, and all of the characters in this movie, I think there's an overwhelming emotional arc to every single one of these characters in this film. So it's really moving to me. It's
one of the most raw movies of this decade.
Yes.
And that's saying a lot, because there's a lot of raw movies this year, but it makes you feel so much. Yeah. And there's so much pain in this movie, and you feel every inch of it, which is kind of wild, because and all credit to the director. I forget his name, Daniel something.
Dustin
Creighton.
Yeah, so salute to him too. He's actually he's doing the
Marvel movie.
Yeah, the Shang-Chi, I think. And salute to him. He's actually a mentor of my boy Gabe.
Oh, no way.
I'm losing Gabe's last name off the top of my head. But Gabe knew him back in like high school or whatever.
Oh, that's
so
wild.
my fraternity buddy knows him.
Yeah,
really well.
My buddy went to school with him too. So
the fact that I think this was his first feature too, if I'm not mistaken too. So the fact that like a first film could elevate that kind of talent level and demonstrate that kind of talent level with this kind of cast right off the bat, just pure natural talent, you know.
Pure talent, and honestly, like if you really think about it, it's one of the best performances from every single one of those actors.
Yeah.
And that's saying a lot.
If not the best.
Because not the best, because Rami Malek is an Oscar winner. Brie Larson is an Oscar winner.
Yeah.
Lakeith Stanfield is probably going to be an Oscar winner.
Yeah,
and
hope
these are all like they're probably their best performances. It's the irony of like he got the best out of them in this one movie, and it's just mind blowing.
Yeah, just overwhelming talent, just around the entire thing. Just overwhelming.
Absolutely. All right, my number 6, and then we're gonna go to break. This is something that you guys won't relate to, so I'm gonna be out here. We out here. I'm going with an anime film. Your Name.
Yeah, I knew it.
I had to put it on this list.
You still haven't gave me the Blu-ray for that, man.
Bro, I asked you, and you were like, bro, I probably won't watch it. Don't give it to me. I'm probably going to watch something else.
Like that too.
You did say that, by the way. Makoto Shinkai has made, literally, this is the top grossing anime film internationally of all time, beating Miyazaki.
Wow.
It beat Spirited Away. It's on the top 3 Japanese anime films in Japan. And this is in Japan, right? So internationally, it's the biggest, but in Japan, it's the 3rd biggest. That's saying a lot, and I know for a lot of people
world
who don't
history of a film that's coming out of the Japanese anime.
That's what I'm saying, and that's the kind of thing that people might ignore anime films. They might kind of brush it off as whatever or otherworldly or not film or whatever they want to say. That's not true, because I know a lot of people are calling this guy the next Miyazaki, and I'm not. There's literally hundreds of videos and articles about the next Miyazaki. There's a reason why, because Your Name tackles emotion, it tackles connection, it tackles sci-fi in a way that's so unique and so original that immediately Hollywood studios bought the rights to it, and I think it was Bad Robot, J.J. Abrams, who bought the rights to make a live-action American version of the film.
Right.
And the reason why is because the movie is that impactful, is that emotional, and it has so much to say about life, death, connection, relationships, love. What is love really? It's a mind-blowing movie, and the way they incorporate the little sci-fi elements, to me, is just the best part of the movie. Obviously, I'm not really into romance anime. I know a ton of people are, and they get mad at me when I say that. But this is one of those rare romance anime movies that I'm like, I have to swallow this pill because they add the sci-fi stuff, and I'm like, all right, I feel you with the sci-fi stuff, but that's this kind of movie. It is that powerful, it is that emotional, and it makes me cry every time. So
nice.
I had to do it, man. I had to put it up there. So
we're gonna hang out and I'll watch it then.
Yeah, we definitely
you won't give him,
and you guys are gonna fall asleep.
Nah. I say it for it, man.
But yeah, all right, guys, those are our 10 through 6. We're gonna be right back and tell you our 5 through 1. So make sure you please stick around because we have lots of surprises and fun choices coming up.
Oh, yeah.
So stick around.
This ain't funny, so don't you dare laugh. With the 4/5 divide you in half. You getting at me equals a bloodbath. You do the math, take you out the equation.
The following is a clip from Darina and Address's debate on Joker, available exclusively on First Cut.
Let me ask you something. How did you feel with the speech at the end when he's on the talk show and he literally says, "You guys get to choose what's right or wrong. You guys get to choose what's funny or not." Like I heard it in my head, film Twitter exploding, and me going like. Because I fucking agree. I'm sorry. People do, like, everybody's always, like, telling you, you can only laugh at this. You can't make this joke. Even if you were raped, you're not apparently supposed to make a rape joke, even though it helps you, like in a therapeutic way.
Yeah, I actually told you this last week. Was it you last week? I actually think that's the worst scene in the movie.
Oh, we were talking about that.
And I said that's the worst scene in the movie.
Well,
I loved it.
Because it's not subtle. It's so in your face. It doesn't leave anything to the imagination.
Come along, children. Now we're going to have a little music.
What is up, guys? We're back talking about our top 10 films of the decade. We're going to start our way number 5 with you, RB3. What's your number 5?
So you remember how I said before the break that I really hate how toxic my list is?
Yeah.
This is another continuation of it.
Let's do it.
No, I wouldn't necessarily call it toxic, but it's definitely going to start some controversy. I love Django, man. Django Unchained actually has, I think, one of the most radical representations of slavery that we've ever seen. The idea of like having a slave, who embodies the Western icon, the cowboy iconography, and literally becomes the hero. It's revisionist history at its finest, and that's what Tarantino's known for Inglourious Basterds, and obviously Hateful Eight is an example that comes afterwards. But the reason I like Django most is because it actually not only subverts a lot of the genre that it pulls from in terms of both slave movies and Western movies, but it does have an unusually epic scale and feel for a movie that is both a Western and both a slave movie. I mean, both of these genres are genres that come from time periods that were particularly like low budget filmmaking was taking place. Particularly, we think of like Roots for slave movies, and we think of old cowboy movies, John Wayne flicks. But the genre in particular that this is coming from is spaghetti westerns. So spaghetti westerns are a lot cheaper and much kind of have a very limited style to them too. But the fact that Tarantino can make those genres in a big budget, flashy, almost kind of fantastical. Thank you. Type of way. It really goes to empathize. It really goes to show like how creative he can be sometimes. I don't love a lot of his movies. I think a lot of his films are up in the air. But I love how radical this movie is. I love how big this movie is. This is probably just more of a personal preference because this is also the movie I've seen the most in theaters this decade. I think I saw this movie 6 times in theaters.
Wow.
I was just in middle school and loving it. Or high school and loving it.
Have you seen any other movies 6 times in theaters?
No, I think I saw Dark Knight Rises 4.
I saw Force Awakens 6 times.
Yeah, I saw Mad Max 4 times too, I think. Django's
Dude,
great.
You don't have to apologize for Django.
Yeah,
it's one of my favorite.
I kind of do.
Why?
Yeah,
it's one of my favorite Tarantino movies. Well, it's not my favorite, but it's one of. It's in my top 3. Tarantino.
I think also knowing
because of
the
his
person.
liberty?
It's the person who Tarantino is. You got to apologize for sometimes.
That's a good point.
The fact that he made this movie makes it kind of weird for me to even appreciate it on the level that I appreciate it. If Ryan Coogler made this movie, this would be easily number one of the decade because it's Ryan Coogler and he's of the culture. I hate seeing Tarantino go to interview, acting black every time he talks about this movie. I hate this dude in the actual movie itself. By the way, the only white guy in the movie who doesn't say the N-word is Tarantino in this movie. Fun fact. And Christoph Waltz, obviously.
Yeah.
But I love seeing Leonardo DiCaprio go ham. I love seeing Jamie Foxx being
Samuel Jackson,
one of the best performances. And again, you both know this. I had a Tarantino class in film school last year, and one of the quotes that like always rattled my mind that Professor Top Boy, legendary professor at USC, always mentioned is that this kind of represents like the Malcolm X dichotomy of like a house slave versus a field slave, right? How radical are you allowed to go if you're stuck in the house with the master, right next to the master? You're going to do more serving of the master than the master's going to do himself. That's Samuel L. Jackson. Whereas Django is a field slave who wants to break free. If the master's house is on fire, he's going to blow wind towards it to keep it going, while the house slave is going to be trying to work to put it out. So that's why I love this movie. It's so radical. It's extreme. It's bloody. It's violent. And it's epic. It's 2 hours and 40 minutes, but I can watch it all in one sitting. So
I know you're not a quotes master, but what's that quote that Candy gives to? He's like, you had my
curiosity. Now you have my attention. Yeah,
it's a great quote. But my favorite quote is still, and it's the most badass quote in the movie. Is like, I like the way you die, boy. And I'm like, yo. After he kills the guy who was beating him up or beating up the other slave.
Yeah,
it's still one of the best quotes of the decade, in my opinion. I love that scene and that entire interaction, and it kind of makes it more fun because it is so violent and bloody in the classic Tarantino way. Yeah. But it's in a very revolutionary way, like you said, with Django being the one doing the violence, and not just white people beating up the slaves, but it's the black cowboy shooting up the white people is completely unique and different. I don't know. I like Django. I think it's dope. Your thoughts?
We just had a huge... I feel like when you were mentioning some of the stuff, you were like talking to me. There's a lot I have to say about Tarantino, but I'm just not going to say anything. I don't want people to go crazy.
No, Tarantino, absolutely.
No, you should shit on Tarantino.
I think we did. Remember our Tarantino episode?
Yeah.
Remember how much
you shot on Tarantino.
I was going to say.
That's also our highest rated episode of the podcast feed.
People were getting on me. They were like, you know what people say about me.
Yeah.
Piece of crap, virtual signaling, blah, 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 SJ, whatever. And I'm like, all right, man.
Yeah, I'm just avoiding all that conflict. I'm like, I respect everybody. That was a good movie. I think Tarantino is a very talented, innovative filmmaker.
I agree. We shouldn't give him as much credit as we give him.
Yeah,
for sure.
I agree with that. You're number 5, Sabrina.
Mine is Call Me By Your Name.
Oh, yeah.
2017.
Yeah.
I think it's just the perfect slow burn romance type of film. It's like such a strong depiction of, like first love, like that type of situation. It's adapted from a novel that I read prior to seeing it, so I was coming in with really high expectations, and it surpassed it for me. And I consider that book one of my favorite books. I consider the movie one of my favorite movies. So there's no way I couldn't put it on this list. It was just jumbling around, for a while. But yeah, Luca Guadagnino's directing is just like completely entrancing for me. I feel like there's so many frames too from this movie that I could just print out and just put on my wall, things like that. Michael Stuhlbarg's monologue near the end.
Yeah. Oh.
That is my favorite page in the book. And so seeing it on screen that way, it's so beautiful. It's so incredible. I'm just bawling my eyes out. Timothée Chalamet and Armie Hammer's chemistry and performances together, I thought was absolutely incredible. Also, something I want to mention, my favorite musician is Sufjan Stevens.
Yeah.
So he has 3 songs in the movie. And
they're great songs, too.
They're amazing songs.
I think they were nominated.
Tearjerkers.
Yeah, Mystery of Love. Yeah. Mystery of Love was nominated at the Oscars. And so, of course, this is just a perfect combination of everything you could ask for me. Just like Sufjan Stevens, like beautiful story. It's set in Italy, love, like it's perfect to me.
Awesome.
So,
your thoughts?
Also a big Sufjan Stevens fan as well. And I love this movie too. I think it's gorgeous. From this, a lot of those like wide shots, like the green pastures and like there's a one scene where they're going through I think it's an Italian kind of like village or
the mountains when Mystery of Love is playing. That one.
Oh, that scene too. But when they're riding the bikes inside, and they're in the I guess they're in the little villa area.
Yeah.
And just the low angle shot is just like looking up at them as they're surrounded by all these ancient looking buildings, and like the use of like the long takes in this movie too. There's a lot of like just long shots of you just observing the world and the nature and everything. So yeah, I think it's one of the best directed movies I think that came out that year. I love Call Me by Your Name. I gotta watch it. That's the one thing I've only seen it like one time. I gotta go back and revisit it.
I've seen it 20 times.
What?
I've so many times. And also it's my third movie from 2017 that's on my list so far. So like
2017 is a big year.
Yeah. I had to chill on that.
That's a good point. I haven't really made a point to see how many of my choices are from a certain year. There was one year specifically that I was very catered towards that I think it was an incredible year, but that I've only chose one from that year. Yeah. My number 5, I already said, was Mad Max, and I already spoke about it.
Yeah.
I'll jump to my number 4, which is coming from that year. I think 2014 had a lot of incredible movies.
2017.
No, I'm saying from my
from your favorite year.
Yeah.
Oh, got it.
I think 2014 gave me my favorite Marvel movie, which was Guardians of the Galaxy. And I think Guardians gave me a lot of hope and gave me a lot of love and just gave me something so different and unique, and that's why I love that movie so much. It's not my number 4.
I was gonna say, damn, Guardians that high?
No.
Nice.
It's not my number 4. It's not even on my honorables, but that's an idea of why I love 2014.
Yeah. I like 2014 too.
2014, I think, gave me one of the most impactful movies I've ever seen, and I've talked so much about this movie, and that's Nightcrawler. I think Nightcrawler is incredible. It is that kind of movie that shows you the psychosis of someone who's ambitious but also crazy, and the idea of him inflicting his will on society and what that looks like in someone who has that much ambition and has that much literally psycho, and how he unleashes his idea of capitalism, his idea of society, his idea of selling what bleeds is literally a line in the movie. Mm-hmm. All those themes in this movie are just mind-blowing, incredible. That performance is one of my favorites of that year. Jake Gyllenhaal should have been nominated for an Oscar, in my opinion. That, to me, is just the perfect embodiment of this twisted... It's a twisted coming-of-age story, which I just find to be mind-blowing. The fact that it ends with him like literally dominating his area and his field, and how he rises up from being like a low-level nothing psycho to literally owning his own company and doing whatever he wants to do. And it's that twisted coming-of-age like capitalistic story of rags to riches in a very dark, tinted kind of way, which is what Tony Gilroy does in this movie, and it's mind-blowing. The final action scene, the fact that he's trying to sets the whole thing up and films it, the way he sells it, his interactions with
Riz Ahmed.
No, not Riz Ahmed, Rene Russo.
Oh yeah,
this movie is incredible, and I literally was smiling from ear to ear after that movie finished. I was just like, wow, incredible movie. I love Nightcrawler. I don't know if you guys have thoughts.
I love Nightcrawler too. Unfortunately, it didn't make my list, but I love the idea of the documentary like representation that has in this, particularly with like news media, how there's always that rush to be first to a story, that rush to get the exclusive coverage, especially when it's something as vital as news, as local news, where a lot of the market, and I think Rene Russo even says in this movie, what sells is car break-ins in Compton. You know what I mean? It's literally everything. It's what the media chooses to represent as the violent images that they want to show is what's going to influence viewers to keep watching, and what entices viewers to keep watching requires a psycho like Jake Gyllenhaal's character to actually
Lou Bloom.
Yeah, Lou Bloom. Lou Bloom.
I know. Shout out to Lou Bloom.
Listening to the show.
Yeah, he's an actual fan of me.
Yeah, and but yeah. the fact that this movie does all of those, it does the neo-noir aspect really well. It does the commentary, the messaging really well, and does the actual filmmaking really well itself. I mean, Jake Gyllenhaal loses so much weight and he looks skeletal in this movie, and this is probably the one that's going to stand out, I think, in his filmography for the longest. So yeah, I love this movie.
Yeah, sure. And Rene Russo literally says we want to scare people. That's our job, is to scare the shit out of people in local news. That's literally our job, and it's just so disturbing to think that that's what they're selling the most, is fear.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen Nightcrawler.
So I didn't catch it in theaters, but I did watch it on streaming, and I did not give it a chance. So now I really didn't, because we had this conversation before with streaming. Sometimes you're just on your phone, you're not paying attention, you're passing the time. So hearing that makes me sad that I missed out on this experience. So
it was on Netflix. I think it still might be on Netflix.
I watched it on, but I'll definitely make sure to actually make a point to set my phone down. Not watch.
It's great. It literally was I could throw this in my number 1. I could throw this in my number 10. It's one of those movies that I was I don't know where to put it, so put it at my number 4.
Yeah.
Your number 4, RB3, or 5 actually, right?
Well,
no, you did 5.
I did 5, and also we already talked about my number 4, which is Moonlight. Okay. So we could move on. We technically talked about my number 3 too already. Short Term 12.
Oh no, wait, what was your number 5?
Django,
number 4 was
Moonlight.
Number 3,
Short Term 12.
What's your number 2?
Number 2. We're jumping to number 2 for me already. Okay, we're just gonna have to do a few rotations.
Yeah.
For me, it's The Master. Paul Thomas Anderson's The Master. To me, this is a showmanship of great acting. I mean, geez Louise, if you. Joaquin Phoenix alone in this movie, Joker is cool. I mean, I love Joker, but Joaquin Phoenix in this movie, I mean, it is insane the kind of acting he's doing in this film. And then to couple that right next to one of the greatest all-time legends, R.I.P. Philip Seymour Hoffman, who plays his part with a mostly straight face, kind of quietness to him too, but with this explosive quality too. I mean, we see scenes where he explodes as well. It's it's mind-blowing how in-depth and thorough these performances are. And I'm just talking about the performances, because the movie in and of itself, the movie is really well made. The movie tells a really compelling story about this dude trying to overcome alcoholism because he's dealing with trauma in his past, and how this cult-like Scientology stand-in is persuading him to move past that. But the way that, for one, on just the trauma level in and of itself, the way it presents trauma, the way it just kind of goes back to a flashback, the way a flashback's kind of set up, and it just kind of, there's a lot of noise and sound design that builds up to it, and there's just a quietness when it goes to these flashbacks and has these long shots. I think back to this one particular scene where he goes to visit his old girlfriend, and it just kind of has a slow tilt down as he's walking through the neighborhood. And the cinematography in this movie is absolutely insane. I believe it was shot in 70 millimeter, so the frame, it looks big and it looks epic. Everything about this movie, Paul Thomas Anderson, this is probably his best one, I think, since There Will Be Blood. And yeah, this is my number 2 of the decade for sure.
I haven't seen that one.
Oh, no way!
No, this is 2 in a row.
Shots fired.
This is 2 in a row. I'll do my homework.
PTA is on a different level, man. Yeah, I mean, everything you said is spot on. I mean, this movie just reaches so many different levels. And the thematic elements of, just like you said,
Scientology, I mean, that's
Scientology and faith and cults, and it's crazy.
And the fact that Tom Cruise is actually one of Paul Thomas Anderson's best friends. And he actually made this movie and showed it to Tom Cruise early, and they almost got into a fist fight over it, apparently.
No way!
Yeah. So.
Well, that's because Tom Cruise you saw that movie, what is it called, Going Clear?
Yeah.
Tom Cruise is God.
He's top official.
Yeah, he's supposed to be like a god in the cult, whatever.
But it's just, I mean, everything about this, I mean, physical, I mean, just, I can't go without just praising the physicality of Joaquin Phoenix. The one scene when they're in prison, he's
losing his mind.
He's losing his mind. There's that giant bed that he's literally banging his head against the entire time. I'm wondering, is that actually him?
Yeah, probably.
But they never cut. And they show him doing it. So I'm like, damn, he's literally breaking his head for this part. It's amazing. To me, it's crazy.
It is. And it shows, everything you said about Joaquin is spot on. He's one of the greatest actors working right now. And like you said, he proves it in The Master.
Yeah, it's a tough movie to consume if you don't really care about it. But if you get 40, 50 minutes in, it'll start hitting. You know? Yeah.
Sabrina, you're number 3, right? Or number 4?
I believe number 4, yeah. Whiplash.
Whiplash. Okay.
I think. Wait, what?
I think I know where that's at on Aces, but. Yeah.
I think Damien Chazelle has just completely killed it this decade with this one, La La Land. Even First Man, which I really liked First Man. I don't think it got the credit it deserved. But this one in particular is so raw and furious. Like, oh my gosh. It's super intense and super tough to watch. As I said before when I was talking about Black Swan, those layers of like ambition. So in this sense, like focusing on like a musical like standpoint, it's super exhilarating. Even on rewatches, it still like physically affects me. Like I'm still freaking out with him, and my heart's like hurting for the main character, but I can't take my eyes off everything that's happening on screen. Excellent directing from Chazelle, obviously, as I said. It builds tension to like a boiling point, and then there's certain like parts where it just like relieves that tension just a little bit, and then you're right back into it. It's just absolutely incredible what he did with that. The way he kind of like manipulates the audience to feel certain ways with his directing. And then just the way it goes back to like that high intensity. The characters are so fully fleshed out. Like so, it's one of the best examples for that from watching, because like I dislike both of their personalities, but I admire them in like a really odd way. Both of them for like different reasons. And so those performances from Miles Teller and J.K. Simmons, I think it's just like magnetic.
Your thoughts on Whiplash?
See, now you're trying to. Now you're trying to dodge. No, you're trying. I was trying to dodge earlier, but now you're not.
All right, this movie's in my honorable mentions.
What? No.
There's a reason why.
You put this as number 1 in 2014.
I did, but there's a reason why. No, I didn't actually. Nightcrawler was my number 1. Nightcrawler was my number 1, which I already mentioned. This is another prime example of 2014. It's in my honorable mentions. I adore this movie, but there's a reason why it's in my honorable mentions, and I told you why before we went on the air, because I can't. It's hard for me to choose one director and 2 directors. I didn't want to put 2 films because I could have done that with Denny, I could have done that with Nolan, and I could have done that with Chazelle, I could have done that with PTA. Like I didn't want to put 2. So there's a reason why.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But Whiplash is incredible, and it's got one of the best final scenes in any movie ever. I cannot lie to you, my first time watching this movie, I literally stood up and started screaming at Miles Teller's character, and I was like, let's go, like literally like as if it was like a football game, and he was just like and I'm like just like screaming at my laptop as I was watching this movie. It's absolutely mind-blowing. It's incredible. J.K. Simmons won an Oscar for this movie. He's insane in this movie, and it's the perfect example too of like, a lot of people really like looking back at it are just like, man, J.K. Simmons is like low-key like an asshole in this movie. Like he's abusive as hell.
Oh yeah.
And a lot of people when they first saw the movie took it as like, yeah, he's the GOAT, he's the badass. I took it as like, I'm gonna beat the shit out of you, bro. Like you don't talk to me like that. I don't care if you're my teacher. That's how I view the movie. But in their perspective, in their eyes, he's like a god, and he must be revered. So when he talks shit at you, you're supposed to like look down, and like he treats you like a dog, and it's crazy. This movie is absolutely. I could go on and on about how I love this movie.
Yeah, I'm just blown away. I really, for some reason, I have money
There's a movie that took my heart and just went like this with it. That is on my list, and it's on my list, and that's why I couldn't put Whiplash.
Yeah. It's just the way I've seen you talk about Whiplash for however many years we've done this podcast. And
I literally talk about it on Screen Junkies. I debated it, and
I was gonna say like a special glow in your eyes comes when Whiplash, like a special glow. I love Whiplash too. I mean, it's a masterpiece. It was close to being on my list too. It was literally so close, and I think for me, the finale, like you said, one of the best. Like the fact that it went on for as long as it went on for, and it still didn't feel like it was. It could have been easy for that sequence to feel like it was just going to drag on and go forever. But the fact that it ends on such a high note, and the fact that you don't really need to know what happens after that point with these characters. You feel fully emotionally satisfied just by ending alone because you've realized you followed this character through his entire journey of realizing his greatness. Amazing movie. Amazing movie. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'll move on to my number 3, and then we'll do your number 3, and then 2, and then your 1. Honorable mentions. You see what I'm saying?
Oh, sure.
My number 3 is, again, I had to pick one from each director. My number 3 is Prisoners.
Oh, wow.
I had to do it. I had to do it. Yeah. Arrival is a masterpiece. Arrival, like you said, is a 10 out of 10. Arrival is the cinematic experience, but I feel like Prisoners is even better. And I know that's kind of saying a lot, but I feel like Prisoners has so much to say about life now, about society, about religion, about faith, about evil, about what's good, about like culture. It's one of the most dense cinematic movies I've ever seen as far as what it's trying to say, how it says it, how it expresses it through different characters, from Hugh Jackman's character of what he's doing and how he justifies his morality and how he justifies his faith and how he justifies his violence and his actions, and yet his love of his daughter, and how Loki's character of Jake Gyllenhaal, you know, struggles with his faith and how he goes about his business and how he sees law and order and good and evil. And then obviously the reveal at the end, it all comes together in this circle of good, evil, hell, heaven, just mind-blowing type stuff. Roger Deakins shoots the shit out of this movie. It's one of the best shot movies. It's extremely long movie, but I enjoy every second of it. The final scene in this movie, it just gives you so much to chew on and to think about. I just think Prisoners is one of the greatest movies I've seen. So that's my thoughts.
No, I totally agree. Prisoners is a brilliant film. And I think it's probably the best acting showcase that we've seen from a lot of actors, even especially from Hugh Jackman. I think it's best Hugh Jackman.
100%. And Jake Gyllenhaal is incredible too in this movie. And I don't know, what are your thoughts on this movie, Sabrina?
I remember reading a long time ago, I can't remember like from where, but that there was a lot of like pro-religious themes. So what are your...
No, it's not even pro-religion. Like we talked about it in our Denny episode, right?
Second episode.
In our second
episode.
Isn't
that crazy? You had Black Swan, Aronofsky.
Yeah.
We did the first two episodes.
You guys did the good ones.
But we talked about how Prisoners has a lot to say about, like, what is Loki's faith? Is he a Christian? Is he an atheist? Is he...
a pagan?
A pagan? Like, so we don't know what this detective has, but you see that he has some sort of religious aspect to him. And then Hugh Jackman's character, who plays the super overly religious guy who justifies his violence, and he's kind of repeating the same actions as what he's accusing the criminal of, like how he how he justifies torture and how torture is used as this way of like, well, if it gets the job done and if it's against the bad guy, it's okay. And I'm like, that's not the case. Like you're just as bad if you're torturing some guy. So I don't think it's pro-religion. I actually just think it questions religion and it questions faith and it questions God and what God is and what evil is and what Satan is, because I think we see Satan in this movie. What's more Satan than torturing little girls? Like, that's Satan to me. And that, to me, the expression of defining faith and defining heaven and defining hell, to me, I think the best definition of faith, of heaven, of hell, can be seen through people. And I think the fact that we get to see the devil in this movie through, metaphorically through a person of someone who tortures little girls, and the fact that we get to see his version of what faith is, that's flawed and it's not right and it's incorrect and it's extreme and it doesn't work. And it only gets him literally buried in this pit.
Buried alive.
And it's just, it's mind-blowing. It's just so good. It's just, I can talk hours about how it's not pro-faith or pro-religion. It's much more questioning faith, questioning religion. What is good? What is evil? What is God? What is Satan? What is heaven? What is hell? What is our purpose in life? Just, it's incredible. And the fact that, like you said, Loki's character has that kind of weird religious background too only adds to it. So I'm done. You're at number 3, Sabrina.
Okay, number 3 is The Social Network.
Okay.
Yeah,
nice.
It was really, I bounced my top 3 a little bit. So it went on. I absolutely adore this movie so much. It's one of the most rewatchable, like, serious type of like films, rather than something like Trainwreck, that I can watch it multiple times in one weekend if I have to. I just think like the first scene just like completely sets the tone. It's so good with Rooney Mara. The fact that it starts with her, ends with her, like, even though like in a way that she doesn't even realize. I think it's really expertly paced. Like you're just constantly, you're going through this like story with them and going back and forth like in that room as they're speaking about the events that happened before. It's so good. Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross's score.
Shout out to Watchmen.
One of my favorites.
Hey.
Did they both do Watchmen?
They do Watchmen.
Yeah,
Oh
and
my
it's one of the
God, I
best
can't
scores
wait
on
to start
TV,
it.
bro.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah, I know.
It's so
Yeah,
good.
so I could talk about that score forever.
The
It
score-
completely enhances the experience for that film. There's so many different elements that are amazing, and they all meld together so well to create something that I think is like, clearly one of the best of the decade. I think it's something that'll be talked about for a long time.
I agree. I think it's one of the most relevant movies, if not the most relevant movie of the decade, because it's that kind of movie that everyone has a connection towards, because everyone knows what Facebook is. Versus other movies that you don't really know the topic of, like Scientology or something else. Facebook is like one of those things where it's like, it's a Facebook movie, and people can get in through that, and what they get out of it is so much more than just a Facebook movie. So I'm sure you have thoughts. So
yeah, we should punt this one.
I was gonna say, let's punt it and let's go back to mine. My number 2, and this is why I just couldn't. Like, I honestly was gonna put both on the list. I was gonna put Whiplash, and this movie, but I had to pick one because I just didn't want to do 2 directors. La La Land is my number 2. I adore La La Land. It's a perfect movie. The emotional baggage, the emotional connection, the cinematic level, the musical aspect with my musical background, like all the kind of stuff that really affect the coming to Hollywood connection, the whole looking for a way, taking crap jobs just to fulfill your dream. It's the most cliche movie of the decade, and yet it does it so well, and it does it expertly in a way that it really blew my mind, just literally through the first song in the movie, the first act. It is just, I adore this movie. I think it's funny. I think it's emotional. I think the songs are super relatable, and it really reaches certain parts in my aspect of my connection towards this movie. The way it's shot is beautiful. I think La La Land is that movie that will transcend for a long time, and that's why I put it as my number 2 of the decade.
Nice. Yeah, no, I you know me, I love La La Land.
Yeah.
I'm a huge La La Land fan. Me and Scott Mans and you too, La La Landers for life. I unfortunately didn't make my end of the decade list. But I think what really makes La La Land stand out is, it obviously references a lot of like those older musicals from like Gene Kelly, particularly like Singing in the Rain and all those older films. But what's interesting about those is that a lot of times those movies kind of deal with themes of like older people coming to terms of like new age and new society. What makes La La Land so unique is that it's a movie by young people, by Damien Chazelle, by Ryan Gosling, by Emma Stone, told from the young person's perspective. And it's not about how to stay relevant in Hollywood, it's about how to get in Hollywood. I think that's a story that a lot more people could connect to. Obviously visually is stunning and fantastic. The whole movie feels like a painting. Salute to the colorist. I think her name's...
Oh, man, the color in this movie.
That's what I was going to say. The color grading is beautiful.
I think it was done by iconic color gradist Natasha. Don't want to mess up her last name, but yeah, it's incredibly well done, expertly done film, and I'm happy to see it made your list.
Yeah, I had the exact opposite problem as you. Well, the same problem, but the opposite outcome. So I chose Whiplash over La La Land, so it's definitely my honorable mentions. Gosh, I think it's such an important film, especially with everything like that we were talking about earlier, kind of with like cynicism and like hard pills to swallow. This is something that makes you feel so much and so positive. You see this journey. It's so whimsical. There's nothing, I could not say any bad thing about this movie. I love it so much.
What do you guys think of the final scene in this movie?
Love
the whole.
It's great.
Like flashback.
Yeah.
Or flash forward, I think.
Yeah, but or I guess reimagining. Yeah. It's just
with all the music coming back. Literally every song is referenced in that sequence, which is just like.
It's great. I think overall, I think what makes that particularly most, obviously a lot of people criticize the movie for taking from movies like Umbrella, from the French movie that I never know how to pronounce the third name of it, and they accuse of taking from other movies. But I think what's beautiful about that ending sequence is that it does show like an artfulness to the idea of Hollywood. Like you can still be swept away by the whimsy and the fantasy of Hollywood, more so than I think a lot of people. And again, we live in a very cynical age, but this movie is decisively not cynical. And I think that's really what makes it stand out.
Absolutely.
Also, the colorist is named Natasha Leonette.
There you go.
Yeah, iconic colorist.
Iconic. It's so good. Your number 2, Sabrina.
My number 2 is Hereditary.
Oh, wow.
Damn.
Yeah.
You're number 2.
Yeah, and I'm so strong about this one.
Yeah.
So I'm a huge fan of like slow burn horror and just horror in general. I grew up watching all of it. You know, I'm really familiar with that genre. And this was the first one that I ever watched that actually affected me afterwards. Like, I've seen everything and nothing like affected me the way this had. Like, I could not sleep for days. And the thing about it, like for a feature debut, it's so meticulously and masterfully directed and written by Ari Aster. Even with his follow-up Midsommar, I feel the same way. I think that's amazing. But this one in particular is so groundbreaking. You know, we've been getting a lot of those like slow burn horror with The Witch this decade, things like that. But this one was just so haunting. I couldn't get the images out of my head. Oh God, the way it is. But yeah, I think it's truly spectacular, and I think for like years to come, we should continue to talk about it.
Yeah,
full disclosure, Hereditary is the one that almost made my list. I had to pick between that or Birdman at my number 10, because Hereditary was my favorite movie of that year. I adore this movie. I think this movie is incredible. I think it is that haunting movie that stays with you. My first experience watching it in the theater was horrifying. I just felt like I was dying, and I was melting in my seat, and I was just like, I can't get over this. I think Ari Aster is that director that we're seeing now, just like a Chazelle, who's on the come up, that's going to make great movies in the future. And now, I have so much horror connection and horror as a genre that I kind of, have a weird relationship with. And there's a reason why it's not on my list as well, but I adore this movie. I think it's mind-blowing. I think Toni Collette just literally dunks on every scene, like LeBron James, like down the middle, like straight up, like dominates
I truly believe
every
it's
scene.
like the biggest Oscar snub ever. So in my mind, she's the best actress winner.
She probably could have won that year.
She could have won that year. I even think Homeboy should have been supporting
Alex Wolff,
the son.
Alex Wolff.
I thought
he did great.
Every time he cried, I was like, I want to cry too, man. Like, oh my God.
Well, there's one scene where he cries. I'm like, oh shit, I'll be crying.
Dude, when he was like, and I was like, I wanted to rip my face off because I was like, that. I would relate to him the most because he's my age or close enough, and I was just like, I want to die.
No, there's parts of this movie you're just like, oh, shit. Like, what I just see? Like, oh my God.
I think this movie is literally might be one of my favorites of the decade, but it didn't necessarily meet the ideas I had of the decade.
Yeah, I just thought it was so, just like with the ideas of like grief and family and how they deal with it in a sense, and we're following this one family. It's just something that got me.
Last thing I'll say, because I want to hear your thoughts. I told you guys like a couple weeks ago, I do really feel like we're in this wave of this weird art house horror, culturally significant movies that are being done in the 2010s, like you said, The Witch, Babadook.
Babadook's great. That should have been
The Lighthouse, if you want to say this year. Hereditary, Midsommar, Get Out, Us. Like we're in this age, in my opinion, The Guest. We're in this age of like these horror movies that are just beyond what they actually are, and showing how genre can win, in my opinion, should win Oscars. This movie should have won Oscars. Get Out should have won more. Us should win. Like, that's the kind of ideas that I have of what genre can do. And we're going to look back at it and be like, damn, we missed it, bro. These movies were so good. Yeah. Your thoughts?
No, I love Hereditary too. I do agree. There's a great new wave of horror that is really exciting. I got to revisit this movie. I think I did a real disservice not seeing this one in theaters. I ended up seeing it when it came out on home video. So I only watched it once. But I got to give it another. It creeped me out too much to like really go back and revisit, because there are a few horror movies that. Like, I don't really get scared about horror movies, like, not really at all. But then when there's one that's impactful, like The Babadook, which The Babadook easily could have made my best of decade list too, like this, like Hereditary, that do really get under the skin and touches something very emotional and personal outside of just going for scares. So,
100%. 100%. I am so excited to hear your number one.
Yeah.
But let's go to if you have any
What's your number
honorable
two?
mentions.
You say number two?
Yeah, La La Land.
Oh, that's what number two. My bad.
Any honorable mentions you want to name? Just a quick little boom, 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 shout out.
Let me go.
So
go
we
real
won't
quick.
take forever.
Again, apologies to the animation community that we're not representing this list.
Yeah.
Inside Out was very close to making it. Drive was very close to making it. Spring Breakers was also like right at the cusp. I mean, that one was like probably the last one to go. I said Spring Breakers, Babadook, a couple others. As soon as, I'm sure once you guys start saying something, I'll start remembering something.
Yeah, honorable mentions?
Besides the ones I've already said, just like throughout the episode, Popstar, Never Stop, Never Stopping.
Yeah.
I was like fighting with that train wreck in 21 Jump Street. I'm like, oh my god, those are my favorite comedy. Yeah, so
21 and 22 to me are perfect movies.
It's so good.
I think they're perfect.
Yeah, Interstellar. Also, my sister would kill me if I didn't say that. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
Yeah.
For animation,
Strong
it's
animation
top tier.
too,
Yeah,
for sure.
top tier. It's kind of a funny story. Francis Ha, Wolf of Wall Street, Marriage Story, Submarine, Like Crazy, and Skeleton Twins.
There you go.
And Carol.
Carol's up there
Yeah.
too. Yeah,
Rooney
That
Mara.
one, yeah.
That's my girl.
Yeah, Kate Blanchett.
Into the Spider-Verse was very close to making my list. I already said Hereditary. Lady Bird I already said. Arrival I already said. Whiplash I already said. Phantom Thread.
Yes.
I love Phantom Thread, man.
Yeah.
I really like. I know it's
That's
a
great.
weird, bizarre ass.
I love Phantom Thread too.
I know.
Yeah.
We both talked about it. I
Yeah.
think we put it pretty high on our list of that year, whatever that year was. But
It was last year.
Phantom Thread was pretty up there for me. No, I think it was 2 years ago.
But yeah,
Either
it was
way.
great. I saw that one 70mm too.
So here's my thing, guys. Full disclosure: I listened to a podcast called The Big Picture, and they had 3 different people all talk about their top 10s, but they all said the same number one, which I thought was mind-blowing. And I already know what it is because I know it's your number one.
Yeah.
But I'm so excited for you to say it. And it was going to come on my list, but I knew you were going to say it.
Oh, yeah. You
So
already do.
say it, man. What
yeah, my number one is The Social Network.
I knew it.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's just that's probably one of the few
That's
movies.
everyone's number one. I'm telling you. Like I was reading some articles and I was like, oh, Social Network keeps being like number one.
Yeah, I think
That's
it's.
crazy.
I think for one, I think it's very easy to put it at the top of a best decade list because it very much is a this generation movie. Like it's very much. I even remember when the marketing was coming out for it, a lot of the posters even plastered up, "This is the movie of our generation." And when you kind of look at the movie, it really kind of is. A lot of the themes that we're dealing with now in terms of like social anxiety and how social media kind of plays an influence into that, how the creator of Facebook in and of himself kind of possesses these issues too, how it's themes on top of themes on top of themes on top of themes. But then on top of that, it's an incredibly visual director like David Fincher paired with an incredibly unvisual writer, an incredibly dialogue-heavy writer like Sorkin. When you mix those two worlds together, it's like it's gold.
It is gold.
And the fact that Fincher is stepping outside of his normal like murder mystery suspense thriller genre to make this kind of borderline satirical piece on a satirical biographical piece about this dude who created something as massive as Facebook, but he puts it on such a human level and dissects his character and dissects these characters like to the T is amazing. And the fact that it gave us Jesse Eisenberg, the fact they gave us Andrew Garfield,
Yes.
I think it really broke Andrew Garfield
Playing a
too.
Brazilian dude.
Yeah. Well, it's not perfect.
It was 2010.
Yeah, it was 2010. It was a different time. And the fact that this movie didn't even win Best Picture of the year that it came out is absolutely blasphemous. Especially losing the King's Speech. It's insane.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's wild.
So yeah, that to me is probably the only movie on this list I feel comfortable with saying it's one of my favorite movies of all time.
Yeah. Really? Wow.
Yeah.
A lot of these are my favorites of all time, but absolutely, man. You already said it's on your top 3, right?
Yeah, Social Network. Yeah, that was
Yeah.
my third one, and I was between them.
It's such a relevant, like you said, man. The fact that Facebook is in the news now, the fact that he was in Congress like 2 months ago, like that's wild. The fact that Facebook is becoming such a huge topic and not just culture, but now politics and world society,
but not even just
wild.
Facebook. The idea of ethics, right? The idea of being a business partner. And like, what does that mean? And where's the line between business and friendship? On top of that, Justin Timberlake in this movie, acting as Sean Parker, the guy who literally destroyed the entire music industry, and how his role plays into this whole equation too. It's just really, really mind blowing. To me, it's one of my favorite movies.
Absolutely.
So good.
Sabrina, you're number one. I'm excited.
My number one is Her.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Should have been an honorable mention.
Well, now you can mention it. It's an honorable mention.
Yeah.
But oh my God, it's so beautiful. It's so like longingly like heartbreaking and sweet. The world building of this like futuristic version of Los Angeles, it's kind of like believable, you know, with the way like technology is heading. Like it's something that we can look at and we'd be like, yeah, like it's possible.
For sure.
Yeah.
Production design.
Oh my God,
mind-blowing.
I think they mixed Los Angeles with Tokyo for like the city.
Or
like,
it might have been Shanghai.
Shanghai.
Yeah.
Okay. Like,
I'm not sure though.
No, yeah. So one of us are probably right.
Yeah.
But just with the whole world it created, not just the AI romance, with that like augmented reality, virtual reality video game, things like that. It's something that's really interesting to look back on like now, just because we have that kind of stuff with like Pokemon Go, things like that. Like we have similar things. It's heading in that direction. So I'm a huge fan of like science fiction elements mixed in with romance, with like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
All right, same director as this too.
Bro, watch your name. That's what your name is.
Yeah.
But
No, that's why when you said it, I'm like, let's all watch it together. I'm down.
I'm down. Yeah.
it's literally romance sci-fi, but I'm like, all right.
Yeah, but it captures this like magic and it shows the multifacets of a doomed romance, which I love seeing on screen. Love that. Just all the good and the bad, and it questions like what it means to be human. It explores how human relationships can like develop, even though they're using artificial intelligence. It's an interesting thing, and getting over a breakup, that like human condition aspect of it. But like there's like the lesson in the end, you know what I mean? Like it feels content, you know, there's like that melancholy a little bit like throughout, but in the end you're like, yeah, it's wrapped up. He's grown as a person. You could apply it to your life. And there's a beautiful score, gorgeously shot. And I love the color grading, like the color palette of this film. So amazing.
Yeah.
So it's like that pastel kind of weird. Oh,
there's
I
like those
love
like
it.
yellows and corals and things like
So
that.
good.
Love it.
Pinks and
we talked about performances. I mean, my God, this guy keeps coming up on our list. Joaquin Phoenix.
Yeah, that's true.
Wait,
huh?
wow,
Yeah.
Oh
You're
my
number one, my
gosh.
number
Kills
two.
it.
Yeah.
Well, he kills it in this movie
No,
too.
he does amazing.
I love how we brought it up last week with Blade Runner 2049 and that idea of having this like AI girlfriend and how that would low key take over the world. And I still think it would take over the world. Like that'd be it. It's over, man.
Reproduction done.
Done.
Like having a companion, having this like companion that follows you around, doesn't even have a body. You don't got to worry about like any of that. It's like,
and the fact that they could keep up with you and have a personality, like ScarJo that voices this, and she gives a great performance too.
Amazing with Jessica.
Now imagine if ScarJo would actually appear, like that'd be even more over. Scarlett Johansson's my wife, and it's like, okay, cool. My favorite scene in this movie or moment in this movie is a funny scene, but it's the scene where Joaquin Phoenix is so nervous to tell his coworkers about homegirl. I forget the
Samantha.
name.
Yeah.
Samantha, and he's like so like insecure and nervous. It's like, this is really weird, and I know it's weird. And Chris Pratt, Pratt is like, hey man, let's hang out. You want to bring your girlfriend? He's like, yeah man. By the way, my girlfriend's AI, and he's like, oh, that's cool, man. Let's hang out.
Love that.
That's awesome.
And Chris Pratt is like talking to her as if making jokes with her, and I'm just like, that's funny, but it shows where progressiveness can go, right? The idea of progressiveness, the idea of being open-minded, that all the whole ideology of what the future can hold, and the fact that people are okay with, oh yeah, it's fine. Oh yeah, you like this? Sure. You're into that? Sure.
Even with Amy Adams, how she says she has the OS and she's like her friend. She's like, it's so weird. I have an OS, but she's like my friend. And he's like, well, I'm dating mine. So
Yeah. What do you think of her, man?
No, I love this movie. Yeah, it was one of my favorites the year that it came out, and I definitely it was consideration for top for me. I love Spike Jonze. I mean, everything Spike Jonze touches is like go to me. And the fact that he wrote this movie and directed it, he usually works with Charlie Kaufman as his writer. But this movie, he put it all together himself, and you could see it's a whole world. Like he said it the best. The world building in this is absolutely amazing. The fact that there's such a big and detailed and a huge world inside of this really small story means a lot, and it shows a lot of attention to detail, shows a lot of care, shows a lot of passion towards this kind of story. So I'm a big fan of it.
Absolutely. That's a great choice, Sabrina.
Yeah, that's a great number one.
That's a great number one. Both you guys are killing it. Yeah. I'm afraid of mine now. So my number one is a movie that I always bring up, and I've said it a million times with you, every time people talk about watching a movie in theater. And I will never forget my experience watching this movie in theater, because it really felt like I was on a journey. I was in a ride. Like, this was just crazy. The crowd was jumped. Like, it was just the most popping experience I've ever had in a movie theater. And that's saying a lot. And that's why it's my favorite of the decade. And I really do feel like this movie is going to transcend this decade. I think it's incredible. And it introduced us to a filmmaker that's going to live on. That's Get Out. Get Out is my number one of the decade. I think this movie has so much to say. Oh my God. It's all inside this genre horror movie. The first moment I saw it, it took my breath away. The ending is perfect. The comedy is perfect. The elements of what is, like we just said about her, what is progress, what is progressiveness, where does this go, how twisted it could be, and how it could be twisted on someone's head, and the way it deals with race and identity. And I feel like Get Out, it just, buying this movie and taking it home to my family. I literally drove to Phoenix to watch this movie with my mom and my brother. And he already saw it, but rewatching it with her and her experience watching it for the first time, and her talking back, because we're watching it at home, and her talking back to the TV, being like, don't do that, listen to Little Rel, like, her reaction to it was so much fun. And then my dad watching this movie, and my dad getting the same experience, being like, man, that's the kind of shit I want to see in the movie theater. Original, unique, fun, different. Like, that's the kind of experience I want to see in movies nowadays. And when my dad said that, I was like, man, biggest props to Get Out for being the movie that impacted me the most this decade out of any other movie.
Yeah, no, that's a great number one pick as well. Get Out, I think, like I mentioned before when I was talking about Moonlight, there's two new films that are considered the Black cultural studies in film school now. Before it used to be Do the Right Thing, now it's Get Out and it's Moonlight. But Get Out is a great example of something that completely subverts the horror genre while still keeping honor to what the genre is in and of itself, while I still think it still leans on a lot of the comedy side too. So it does a lot of things really well. It's a great debut feature for Jordan. I mean, I don't think it's his literal first movie that he directed, right?
It was.
It was? Okay. I'm mistaken then. But great debut for Jordan Peele. I'm so happy that movie got the attention and won the Oscar for, I think Jordan Peele won the Oscar for Best Original Screenplay. Because the screenplay for that movie is top notch.
I picked it for Best Picture. I still think it should have won Best Picture. I love that movie so much, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm a big fan of Get Out, obviously, and I love Us as well. So it was tough.
I adore Us.
For me, it was tough deciding if I was going to put Us on this list or Get Out on this list or which one was I going to put. But I didn't end up putting either. But I really respect putting Get Out.
And before we get to you, Sabrina, I got to give that quick shout out to in my opinion, one of the best actors working now, and that's Daniel Kaluuya, who actually got nominated for Best Actor in this movie, deservedly so. Because immediately when I first heard his name being casted in this movie, I remember thinking like, oh yeah, that's the guy from Black Mirror, and he killed me in Black Mirror, episode 2, one of my favorite episodes, because I remember thinking like, this guy's an actor, like he's good. But yeah,
salute to Lakeith too.
Oh, Lakeith, he's great.
Yeah.
He's great in this movie, and he's in it for a very short amount of time, but it's still like him walking through that neighborhood, and the idea of it being twisted around, and he's like, yo, this weird white neighborhood, man, this is weird. It's just so good, man. It's so good. Sabrina, any thoughts on this?
This was one of my favorite movies of the year. I completely agree. And I cannot believe that it didn't make my top 10 or I didn't talk about it for honorable mention. I retract that. It's added. But yeah, this is one of those. I actually saw it in theaters so many times because you guys mentioned like multiple viewings in theaters. This was the one, hearing the audience's reactions. I saw it in Chicago. I literally, when I went home, I was like, okay, Mom, we need to go see this. So I saw it with my mom. I saw it with my dad a separate time. My sister. I went with multiple friends in LA, all different areas. It was so cool to see how people reacted to this movie. And the shouting, everything.
My theater was like on their feet. And I was like, I feel like getting on my feet. Like, it felt like that kind of experience where people got so into it. It made the movie even better. The fact that you were Chris. Like, I felt like I was him, and I was like, oh my God, like, what would I do in this situation? Like, people felt that. People were cheering for him to, like, murder these people. And I was like, yes, murder them, please. It's incredible. I adore this movie. And again, it's one of those weird, twisted, like, Hereditary and Get Out are the two movies that my all of my family literally adores, and we watch multiple times. And the commentary, the director's commentary that Jordan Peele does in this movie only proves how much of a genius that guy actually is, and shows like every little frame of this movie has something to say. And that's just, that's why it's my best of the decade. Nice. So that concludes our lists, guys. Wow, we did it. My God.
Like nearly 2 hour episode.
It's like a 4-hour episode, man. We out here, bro.
Yeah.
I appreciate you guys catering towards me to do this, because I know a lot of you guys, and by a lot, I mean
just me.
I was chilling.
Was like, yo, this is too soon. But I feel like we did a good job, man. We picked the right picks, and we did the right things, and we all had different, unique picks, which is perfect. I think that works even better. So, any final thoughts or any shout outs you want to give?
I love all of your guys' choices, you know, for like Her, The Social Network, and for Get Out. I think those are 3 really great films that kind of like, you know, define the decade a little bit. So we got,
One thing I forgot to say during my honorable mentions was Logan. I love Logan way too much.
You know what's funny?
To not shout that movie.
None of us had a superhero movie in our list.
Yeah,
especially
I thought about that a lot.
That's for me.
I thought about that a lot.
For me, that's weird, right?
I just got rid of Logan.
No way.
This morning.
Yeah. Because for me, I always cater towards these kind of movies, man. But that's just me. So
I thought a lot about Avengers, and I thought a lot about Logan. But neither of them made it.
There you go. Alrighty, guys, that was our list of the top 10 films of the decade. Let us know what's yours. You can let us know in the comments down below. You can let us know on Twitter. I'm at Squad Leader Ace.
I'm at Director RB3.
At Sabrina X Monica.
Yeah, you can tweet us your list. What is your top 10? Let us know what you think. We're going to talk a lot more about this episode. We're going to probably be tweeting this out. So, engage with us. Have fun with us. That's what social media is for.
Yeah.
Alrighty, for the Meaning Of podcast, I'm Andres.
This is RB3.
I'm Sabrina.
And we are peacing out. Peace out, guys.